Port workers have stopped showing up to work starting on Friday and over the weekend as labor talks have seemed to hit a rough place between the ILWU and FMA. Sal Macargliano is here to talk about the latest and where this could all be headed. Sal, thanks for joining us this morning.
Oh, thanks for having me.
So obviously, Sal, we know that this work stoppage started on Friday, and it looks like it's continuing into this morning as well. What's going on at the ports right now? Just kind of a broad overview.
So on Friday in ports up in the northwest, and Oakland, they had shutdowns due to insufficient labor showing up. And so they basically canceled work. What we're hearing now is the TTI facility in Long Beach, which is one of the biggest in Long Beach. Right now, there are two MSC and an HMM ship up against the berth. They're canceling trucks this morning because they're believing they're not going to have enough workers to work the port. And that's what we're seeing right now. We're seeing a dispute between the ILWU and the PMA. As you know, this has been going on for over a year. Last May, they started their negotiations, and negotiations had been proceeding along at a pretty good rate. They had been able to hash out nearly everything. But the issue that has got them hung up right now is the fact that the PMA, the Pacific Maritime Association, wants to impose a 3-year wage freeze on the ILWU. And the ILWU has not had a strike. That's been a term that's been used here recently by several media sources, and it's not exactly true. It's not a strike, but what we're seeing here are work stoppages, work slowdowns, and this is going to impact the port because of a variety of other issues that are going on globally.
Looking at these slowdowns or shortages, are there any specific parts of the port that are being really slowed down, or is it really just a little bit all over the place?
It's a little bit all over the place, and I don't think it's, the PMA is trying to make this sound like it's a coordinated offensive by the ILWU, and it doesn't appear to be that. It seems to be right now that several areas are being used or labor shortages are coming in certain areas. And the idea being that if you don't have enough labor or gangs to work a ship, what's going to happen is the PMA is going to cancel the work for that ship today because it's not going to be productive. And so that's what we're seeing right now. The notice went out yesterday that the TTI facility at Long Beach was not going to accept trucks this morning. And that has, of course, a ripple effect because containers that were supposed to come out today is going to impact containers that are supposed to come out tomorrow and containers that are supposed to be delivered now. So this has a huge ripple effect. And when you add to it issues that we're seeing globally, you talked about the Panama Canal being at low levels, and that's reducing the amount of freight that can go through the Panama Canal. You're seeing the shift from the West Coast to the East Coast. That's been an ongoing issue for over a year. We're seeing increased rates to go through the Suez Canal. And the issue, the one we need to be asking here is we're seeing extremely low freight rates. And who's the beneficiary of an incident where freight rates all of a sudden are going to start increasing? And the one group that really benefits from this is the ocean carriers. And I'm not saying the ocean carriers are instigating this, but they are a beneficiary of it. And so it doesn't give them a lot of impetus to really resolve this issue with the ILWU right now.
Obviously, this work stoppage is very impactful, but it's much less so than if it would have come last year when we were very much worried about it. And the port activity was really still kind of booming on the West Coast last summer. However, since those negotiations started at the end of last summer, we have had the Ocean Shipping Reform Act passed, and we have now some more power from the FMCSA, or FMC, sorry, not FMCSA, and from the actual legislative bodies that govern ocean shipping. Do they have any say about what happens if a work stoppage were to turn into a strike, or about when those ripple effects happen? Does the FMC have any power to then step in and maybe make some adjustments to make it less impactful?
Well, I think the ocean carriers were not crazy about the Ocean Shipping Reform Act, and they're even less crazy about some of the legislation right now that's being proposed. The FMC has very little argument here, or little power to do anything in terms of negotiation. This would be more over with the Department of Labor, and you would see something akin to what we saw the Biden administration step in when the Class 1 railways were talking about a strike or a stoppage. I think that's the next element you need in here. The problem is both sides, the ILWU and the PMA, are trying to make their point across. And the ILWU has issues on their own. They've fought against automation. They fought against a lot of changes that went on. The big issue that they're advocating is that the PMA has been, which are made up largely of the ocean shipping carriers and the terminals, have made record profits. And now they want to freeze wages for 3 years, whereas I am sure the PMA's associations and groups are not going to freeze their wages for 3 years. And the ILWU has worked the ports and done everything they were supposed to do during this period of time. They would have been in a much better position to negotiate last year, but this is one of the reasons why this got pushed for a year, to put them in a position where they're not as strong. But as said before, there's a lot of global issues that will turn a West Coast strike into a global impact and will cause rates to spike across the planet if this happens.
And so can you dig into that topic a little bit more, talking around the timing of this all and really compared to last year and what we're seeing right now in vessel traffic?
Sure. So obviously last year, this would have been just absolutely cataclysmic. You would have had it with the ports jammed up. But right now, what we're seeing is we're seeing cargo that's been diverted from the West Coast. We've seen that graph showing the statistics showing that the percentage of cargo to the West Coast has decreased over time. But that cargo is going two places. It's going either through the Panama Canal, through the new lane of the Panama Canal where those Neo-Panamax vessels are going through. However, we have a drought in Panama right now, and we're seeing vessel draft restrictions on those Neo-Panamax. We've gone from 50 feet down to 44.5 feet, and that's a substantial loss of cargo going through the Panama Canal. At the same time, the Suez Canal has had a huge spike in its surcharges going through. We've also seen incidents in the Suez Canal. We had 2 ship groundings within the past month. We just had a sandstorm close to the Suez Canal for a day. We've had a lot of instances with that going on. At the same time, you're seeing record low freight rates at this time, and we're seeing the profits for the ocean shippers come down. And so I think the ocean shippers have a window here where they're not really as kind of animated to get this resolved as quickly as others may be. And I think this is where we really need to see some sort of action come in here to push the ILWU and the PMA to resolve this issue. I think you need to get the heads of both those organizations together in a room and hammer this out.
I think if you are specifically talking about the United States, if you're the Gulf Coast ports or the East Coast ports, and you're sitting here and wondering, oh man, did we maybe make a mistake in choosing so much investment during a time when we thought there was going to be this continued traffic from the West Coast? They're now sitting here saying, okay, this might be a really good opportunity for us, but we got to also make sure that it doesn't happen to us, right? We got to take care of our workers too. What do the Gulf Coast ports and the East Coast ports learn from a situation like this? And then how do they translate it into making sure that they don't face the same consequences?
Yeah, it's unique in the United States in that the West Coast ports are all linked together in this same labor agreement. You don't have that in the Gulf and the East Coast ports. The ILA, which operates mainly on the East and Gulf Coast ports, is not as intricate as a union as the ILWU is, because there are fewer ports on the West Coast, because this happened during the 1930s and you had this huge unionization that took place. Those ports are really ingrained together. So what happens in Seattle, Tacoma impacts what happens down in San Diego. That's not the same in Houston, Savannah, and New York, New Jersey. It's completely different. But you're right that, they are seeing their investment pay off in these ports and these infrastructures right now, because they can absorb a lot of that spillover. However, as I said, there are limitation factors that are playing a role here with the Panama Canal and the ability to transport cargo. Again, for the shipper, I think one of the biggest things is how much they're benefiting from diversifying where their cargo comes in. Prior to COVID, a lot of shippers had all their cargo coming into LA and Long Beach. Many shippers now have diversified. They're coming in through multiple ports. And I think that's a key element that will mitigate part of this issue if the ports have a slowdown of any kind.
Shedding some light on this developing situation. We'll continue to reach out as this develops. If people want to reach out to you, how can they do that?
Sure. They can follow me on Twitter at MercaglianoS, or follow my YouTube channel, What's Going On with Shipping.
I would absolutely recommend doing both of those things. Sal, thank you for joining us. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks for having me, guys.